After the war to end all wars, the world desperately wanted to build a lasting peace. But here's the thing. The Treaty of Versailles, the very document that was supposed to secure that peace, well, it ironically held the seeds of an even bigger, deadlier conflict just 2 decades later. So let's unpack how a flawed attempt at peace actually paved the road to World War II. First, you have to get your head around the sheer scale of the devastation. World War I left an estimated 40 million casualties in its wake, that's soldiers and civilians combined. A number so unbelievably horrific that pretty much the entire world was united by one single desperate goal, making sure this could never, ever happen again. And that leads us to the central puzzle here. If everybody on the planet was desperate for peace, how did the treaty designed to guarantee it fail so completely? How did it lead directly to an even bloodier war? To really understand why the treaty failed, you have to go back to its original vision, which was, well, it was incredibly idealistic. And that vision came from one man, the U.S. president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, who proposed this radical new blueprint for the world. Think about this. The war isn't even over yet. It's January 1918, and Wilson goes before Congress to lay out his famous 14 points. This wasn't a plan for how to win the war, it was a plan for what came after. He was thinking about a peace built on principles, not on punishment. At the very heart of his vision was this idea of national self-determination. And you have to understand, this was a revolutionary concept back then. It basically meant that people should get to decide their own fate. Poles should live in a free Poland, Czechs in a free Czechoslovakia, not stuck as subjects of some huge, sprawling empire. And he built on that idea with other pillars, all designed to stop future wars. Things like no more secret treaties that had tangled Europe up in knots, freedom of the seas, and free trade to connect economies, a reduction of weapons for all nations, and, this is the big one, a general association of nations, which would become the League of Nations, to act like a global peacekeeper. But, well, all of Wilson's idealism was about to hit a brick wall. That brick wall was the brutal reality of European politics. When the Allied leaders all gathered at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, their goals were, let's just say, very different from his. And right here, you see the massive conflict. Wilson shows up in Paris talking about a just peace, about being lenient. But you have to remember, the European allies, especially France and Britain, had seen years of horrific trench warfare on their own land. They weren't interested in ideals. They wanted security, they wanted revenge, and most of all, they wanted Germany to pay for everything. And this quote from the final treaty, it tells you everything you need to know. There's no talk of a just peace or leniency here. It is laser-focused on one single thing: compensation by Germany for all damage done. This wasn't a blueprint for peace. It was a bill. So, in the end, you can probably guess who won that argument. The Allied vision for a punitive, punishing peace completely won out. The final Treaty of Versailles wasn't a reflection of Wilson's 14 points at all. It was a document designed to cripple Germany. Let's start with the price tag. Germany was ordered to pay reparations that, in today's money, would be about $270 billion. I mean, just an absolutely staggering economic burden that was designed to crush their economy for generations. And then they went after the military. The German army, which was once this mighty force, was slashed to just 100,000 men. Its navy, limited to only 6 battleships. It was basically a total disarmament meant to make sure Germany could never be a military threat again. But the humiliation didn't stop there. Oh no. Germany was stripped of all its colonies overseas, and that valuable industrial region Alsace-Lorraine, which they had taken from France decades earlier, it was handed right back. This was a huge blow to both their economy and their national pride. So when you put it all side by side, the difference is just wow. Where Wilson wanted a peace without vengeance, the treaty delivered pure punishment. Where he wanted disarmament for everyone, it only disarmed Germany. And maybe the most damaging part, it forced Germany to accept the entire blame for the war, throwing out any idea of a just peace. So, you think after all those battles in Paris, the treaty was a done deal, right? Well, ironically, its biggest fight was still ahead, not in Europe, but right back in the US Senate. Which brings up a really fascinating question. Why on earth would America reject a peace treaty that its own president had fought so hard for on the world stage? Well, the answer really comes down to his 14th point, the League of Nations. A lot of people in the U.S. Congress were really, really suspicious of the League. They were afraid it would drag America into every little European squabble and that it would cost a fortune. But the number one objection was about sovereignty.
They believed the League would take away Congress's constitutional power to declare war and give it to some international committee. And because of that, the U.S. Senate rejected the Treaty of Versailles. Wilson, who was exhausted from campaigning for it, suffered a series of strokes and just couldn't get a compromise done. So the League of Nations, his proudest achievement, was launched without its most powerful supporter. It was weakened from day one. Okay, so let's recap. We have a treaty built on punishment, and it's politically hobbled from the start. Now for the final tragic act. How this deeply flawed peace didn't just fail, but actively helped pave the road to a new, even more horrifying war. Inside Germany, the treaty wasn't seen as a peace agreement. It was called the Diktat, the dictated peace. The war guilt clause made people furious, and those crippling reparations led to insane hyperinflation and total economic collapse. It created this toxic breeding ground of anger, humiliation, and despair, which is perfect for extremist politics. And this timeline, it just connects the dots with chilling clarity. The treaty gets signed in 19. The economic chaos of the 1920s follows. Then in 1933, Adolf Hitler, who literally promised to tear up the treaty and restore German pride, rises to power. And just 6 years after that, he invades Poland, and the world is at war again. Which leaves us with this final, really haunting question. Was the treaty so flawed, so punishing, that it made a Second World War pretty much inevitable? It's a question historians still argue about, but what seems clear is that the attempt to build a lasting peace in 1919 became one of the direct causes of the world's greatest tragedy just 20 years later.